Welcome to a live episode of Surviving the Survivor. We bring you the best guests in all of true crime. Don't forget to subscribe and smash that like button. Here's your host, Emmy Award-winning broadcaster, Joel Waldman.
What's up, SCS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in true crime. 2 shows, 6 guests, the best you'll find in their field. I'd like to say we're covering a lighter subject than we just did, but this one, another horrific story, but I guess that's what you get with true crime. Of course, we just spoke to Riley Strain's family, and he is the missing 22-year-old University of Missouri college student who disappeared 11 days ago after leaving a bar in Nashville alone. So hopefully that ends well. Tonight, we are back to discussing 13-year-old Maddie Soto, Madeline Soto. At the end of February, she disappeared, speaking of disappearing people, prompting a statewide missing child alert. Officials then confirmed her body was later found in rural Osceola County just days after she was first reported missing. Stephan Sterns, that is her mother's boyfriend. The mother's name is Jennifer Soto. He is the prime suspect in Madeline's disappearance. He's also accused of moving her body in the morning hours of Monday, February 26th, after killing her in Kissimmee. This all according to the Orange County Sheriff's Office. The ME, as far as I know, we are still waiting, at least publicly, for cause of death, cause and manner. Today, we've got an amazing panel, so I wanted to look at some of the legal angles here, but more importantly, we've got 2 incredible experts on domestic violence and grooming, and I really want to open it up to STS Nation with your questions, and I think everyone agrees with Jesse Pinkman. This case makes me sick to my stomach. This is a tough one to swallow. First up in the orange, in the apricot, coming to us from Colorado, Ann Munch is an attorney with more than 30 years of experience as a career prosecutor and advocate for victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. She has done it all. She worked and helped the military. She's worked extensively on the development of the sexual assault prevention and response programs within the military. And she does this now more out of a labor of love. She's dedicated to improving response to crimes of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. And so we welcome her. She was on a while back and is back now. And then in addition to Ann, we've got Anna in Atlanta, Georgia. She's a licensed clinical social worker. She set out in 2020 to re-educate adults about child sex abuse by concentrating on grooming, which is the precursor to sex abuse. She released her debut book, Duck, Duck, Groom, and it is out now. The subtitle to that is Understanding How a Child Becomes a Target, Duck, Duck, Groom. And last but not least, Belkis Plata. She's a champion of human and civil rights. She works tirelessly to defend Jacksonville's most underserved and marginalized citizens. We've had her on about the Shanna Gardner case. Now we're heading a little further south to Orlando to discuss the Maddie Soto case. And Belkis, born in the Boogie Down Bronx, like my dad. And so we do not mess with her, although I messed around with my dad, and he wasn't like the tough, gruff New Yorker. He was a mild-mannered New Yorker. But Belkis got that fiery side. So there you go. To you, Anna, just tell me about your book. How did you decide to write it? And where can people find this book? It's interesting, especially for our community who's interested in this.
Well, thank you, Joel, for giving me the opportunity to be on tonight and meet your entire community. I have a history of working with convicted sex offenders. I'm doing cognitive behavioral therapy. And it was part of my training when I was in school to get my degree in social work. And then for several years after, I stayed on and provided individual and group counseling to people who had been convicted of sexual crimes against children. And that has informed every decision I have made since. So I have a family of my own. I actually have 5 kids. And I started to realize that again and again, I was having the same conversations with moms on the playground or at a coffee shop when they had real concerns about things like sleepovers and, family members who might come over and be, extra handsy with their children, and some of those common concerns, but also parceling out what are the myths. And I realized that we do a very bad job of preparing parents to protect their children effectively. So because I have a full house of little ones, I realized I'm not going to be able to get out of the house to do something. So I might as well write it. And that was really my call to change the conversation by providing a little bit of perspective when it comes to the grooming process. And I break it down into 4 stages in my book so that parents know exactly what to look for, because predators are running on gas. And in the book, I describe grooming, access, and space. And we're going to get into that, I know, this evening with your community. But this is such an important topic that we need to get down to brass tacks. We don't need to talk esoterically about this subject, because there are more Maddies out there than we realize.
And that is an excellent point. So this is, sadly, it's too late for Maddie, which is horrific, but this is can be a cautionary tale for people within the community and who are watching and listening and who are reading Anna's book. I have 3 little ones, and on a prior show, I didn't know what to tell my kids, and we'll get into that as this. I don't have 5 kids, thankfully, but my sister does. My sister has, just so you all know, my sister has 5 daughters. I have 3 little ones, and my youngest is the boy. So it was the one thing that I was able to beat my sister at. My sister was valedictorian in high school, became a doctor when she was 22. I won't go through the whole list, but needless to say, I produced the one male in my family. On to more serious stuff here. So, Anne, to you, you have been in courtrooms your whole life. A jury trial is now set for Stephan Sterns for May 13th. It has been a real lull with information. I was scouring things, have not found a whole lot of new information. He has not been charged with homicide yet, but he does in Florida potentially face the death penalty with capital sexual battery. There's a law passed here a year ago where he is death penalty eligible. How is this legal process going to play out for him, do you think? And why hasn't he been charged for the homicide yet?
Well, I would say that a jury trial with what we know so far about just the background facts of this case in May seems lightning fast. I would offer that. And the investigation, I'm sure, is ongoing around the homicide, in addition to the sexual assault aspect of what happened to her and how many times and all of that. These are complex investigations. And so, they just need to take the time that is required for them to put a case together and try to identify the murderer. I mean, try to identify the suspect and then the defendant. And I'm sure that is what they're doing. And because of the circumstances of it, my guess is that they are just taking their time and really making sure that they don't miss anything. So the court process will very likely make way for whatever happens with the investigation. If that means bumping the trial date, if that means additional charges, if that means, it could mean a lot of things. So this is really very much just the beginning. I mean, I know he waived the reading of the formal charges and his advisement. I don't know if there's typically in Florida another step between those things, like a preliminary hearing to establish enough evidence to hold him, or maybe a grand jury or something like that. But a May trial date would very likely yield if additional charges come in.
Black Widow, who is a friend of the show and who looks like a James Bond female villain in her photo. She comes to us from the Republic of Ireland. Anna, to you, she wants to know on a very serious note if there's a book that you'd recommend for adult survivors. Your book is for parents of young children, but is there something that you or Anne would recommend, Anna, to adult survivors of SA?
Well, actually, one of the projects that I'm working on currently is a workbook version of this book for adult survivors that's coming out in May. But at the meantime, I can put a list together if you'd like, Joel, and you can post that at a later time if that would be sufficient.
That'd be great. We'll put it in our show summary today once I get that list, and it'll be there for, as my mother says, for eternity. Everything she's convinced on the internets, on the webs, are there forever. Belkis, to you. So Stephan Sterns, he's going to be represented by a public defender. Again, this trial date is set for May 13th, which Anne just said is incredibly fast, not to mention everyone is convinced he committed this murder. There's been no murder charge. What do you think is going on behind the scenes? It's been quiet also for a bunch of days now.
Sure. So I would bet $1 million this case is not going to trial in May. It's not realistic. It's not going to happen. There's no way that the defense can be ready to defend a case of this magnitude in that period of time. I also would anticipate that they might be convening a grand jury to indict him, to seek the death penalty on him for the capital sexual battery charge, now that is punishable by death. And this might be the first case that we actually see in Florida where that punishment is sought. But I imagine, there's so much investigation that is still happening, not only by law enforcement, but the attorneys who have to get their bearings on all of the information that has been gathered. So I think it's just a date, that's on the record, but I don't see that ever happening. There's just no way that anyone could be ready to try this type of case in that period of time.
And Belkis, if you're this guy and if you're this Stephan Sterns attorney, you're going up and down escalator. I mean, he is completely convicted in a court of public opinion. Forget him for a minute, but let's say just hypothetically you took on this case. There's 100% a presumption of guilt, not innocence right now. How would you tackle that if you're representing him?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have some very serious conversations with your client, especially if they are going to be seeking the death penalty. This may be a case that you enter into negotiations with the prosecution. If preserving his life, if they put that on the table and we have concerns about that, then we might have to have a real serious conversation about offering a life sentence to avoid the death penalty.
And to you from Natalie James. So he was not there for his first appearance. He bowed out of it. Natalie wants to know, why is this allowed? That's number one. And also would like to get your take. I'm kind of obsessed with this now because the media is so polarized politically, but they become much more subjective. There's no doubt about it. And there is, with social media, a growing presumption of guilt, not innocence. In no way am I saying this guy is innocent. But is it becoming harder for lawyers to defend a guilty person who the public already has essentially convicted?
Yeah. So to your first question, or to the question that came from the listener about not being in court for these, this earliest proceeding, there are stages of the court and trial process where their appearance is basically required because there's so much at stake. When you get into kind of the meat of the case, or there's testimony or there are motions, your rights are on display or at risk. The court will require the presence of the defendant. But for the very early things, it's very common, and I would imagine Belkis sees this as well, but it's very common for attorneys to come in on behalf of somebody that is charged with something and waive that first appearance and waive the reading of the charges, which are more procedural than substantive in general. And so that is not really that unusual, but I'm sure that he will he'll be in court. There's no way that they're going to proceed too far in this case without him there. Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Ann.
Okay. And then I just forgot the second question. Sorry. Give me a cue.
About the presumption. I was asking about the presumption of guilt as opposed to innocence.
So, this is a horrible case. There isn't a human being that isn't going to resonate with what happened to Maddie Soto. I mean, it's as bad as it gets, right? It really is. And so that evokes quite a bit in the human being, because we all like to believe that the world is basically pretty safe, and that kids, especially, we want to believe that they are safe and that people take care of each other, and especially young children or even adolescents, And so I think what happens is that emotional response really grows very natural, and it becomes very strong in the court of public opinion. And it doesn't surprise me. We see it go the other way often with adult rape victims, or even sometimes with domestic violence. We'll see the court of public opinion swing the other way and maybe judge the victim harshly. But certainly in a case like this, not a surprise at all that people are having the kinds of responses that you're referring to.
Yeah, a lot of visceral responses to all this going on. Jenny Price here. Any news on the mom whose name we do not speak? Well, I don't. I very don't. Well, her name, I'll say it, is Jennifer Soto. She's not been convicted of any crimes yet. But Anna, I'm curious, and the COE, the chief of everything, who is the wife, she's pulled up some, I think, new video, and I'm going to play that in a moment. But Anna, do you have any thoughts on this? The mother in her interviews seems to have very kind of like blank affect. Is it possible that she was also manipulated by this guy, Stephan Sterns?
Absolutely. We also don't know what her history is with abuse or sexual abuse in her own childhood. We don't know the inner workings of this relationship. We do know that it's lasted several years. And I know there are a lot of rumors flying about what was permitted in the house and what wasn't. But what I need your listeners to understand is that the home is where 82% of all child sexual abuse occurs, either the home where the child lives or the home where the predator lives. So this is a perfect example for listeners to recognize that bringing people into your house is one of the most high-risk environments. And if we can just start from that understanding, I think a lot of people have the assumption, oh, it's my house, I'm safe there. You're going over to somebody else's house, you're safe there. And this woman was living there, presumably with this man for many years, with the opportunity, if we go back to the concept of predators running on gas, you've got access, you've got space. And he had the opportunity to build that relationship of trust with that woman. And whether she knew what was happening or not is really beside the point, because grooming is observable. So somebody in Maddie's life was able to recognize, hey, there's something a bit off here. There's a pattern of behavior happening with Stephan and Maddie that is a cause for concern. And if we can just educate people a little bit better on what grooming actually looks like, those observable elements, we can help prevent it.
MS, and this one's for Belkis. How long do they have in Florida for a speedy trial? Does the death penalty change the given time to trial, Belkis?
So the state of Florida has 6 months from the date of arrest. So that is why many times we hear these trial dates and then they get pushed and pushed and pushed. Ultimately, the defense is likely going to be the one to waive speedy trial, to ask for more time to prepare. The death penalty doesn't affect the speedy trial date, but it will affect when the defense or the prosecution will be ready to try a case, because a death penalty case is not only a trial phase, it's also a penalty phase, which is something above and beyond a trial. And so that's going to take a lot more time to prepare for.
Margie M, back to Black Widow's question. I'm an adult survivor of childhood essay, a book which helped me, The Courage to Heal by Ellen Bass and Laura Davis. So that is one title at the STS community, always in the know. Chemtrilia. That's a tough one to say. I'm just going to call you Chem. I was abused between the ages of 11 and 13. Then I was groomed at 15. I'm so aware of protecting my daughter from going through the same things. I think it's so important to be aware of these things. I have a question for you, which is kind of dumb, Anna, but the difference between the abuse and the grooming, if you can kind of define what that difference is.
Yeah, so one of the ways I describe it when I'm talking to parents or adults in the community is that there are 4 F's of grooming: flattery, favoritism, forbidden fruits, and fear. So what I want people to think about is that grooming is like a perverse form of courtship. So Joel, in your relationship, you probably courted your spouse. Is that right?
I did. I walked her dog for 6 months. Yes. Yes. And by the way, 5 years after we were married, she's like, oh, my friends told me you're kind of good looking. I never noticed. So the dog walking came in handy.
So you started by doing something really sweet and kind. And grooming always starts off sweet. It doesn't start off aggressive or violent. It starts off sweet. And what I want people to consider is that when an adult pops into your life and says, wow, your child is so pretty, so exceptional, stands out among the rest, that can be very intoxicating. You know, I'm a parent. I realize that my children have strengths and challenges, but when we hear other people complimenting our own kids, that can be very tempting. So it always starts positive, and flattery is the number one approach. And I would argue that especially nowadays, as we move further and further into a social media, how many likes do I have? How many followers do I have? That's only growing. And the person benefiting from that are the predators, not our kids and our families. That second stage, that second F of the 4 F's of grooming is favoritism. So this is where if I'm a teacher and I'm a predator within a school environment, I might say, you're the best kid in this whole class. You're the one who stands out. And in this way, we isolate the child from their peers. Now, nothing necessarily has happened physically at this point, but it's in that third F, that forbidden fruits, where that adult says, hey, I'm going to let you cuss in my class. I'm going to let you come over to my house at lunchtime. I'm going to let you drink a beer when I babysit you, and don't tell your parents. And then in that fourth F, we get into the fear, where we're saying that we're going to keep this between us. And one thing that I want to make sure that I touch on is that in that forbidden fruits, when kids are allowed to break rules that their parents have set for them, whether they're safety standards, whether they're behavioral standards, whether it's substance use, that's an opportunity to isolate the child from protective caregivers, because children do not want, by and large, to disappoint their parents. And so that is helping insulate that child victim, because the last thing they're going to do is to admit to the people they care about and who protect them, I broke one of your rules. And I did it with somebody that you trust and that I trust, because grooming has to involve the guardians and the caregivers.
I was just looking at this comment while you were speaking, and this is super helpful knowledge, but Patricia Burns, Paul Carrick, a British Metropolitan officer, got a full life tariff here, sentenced in the UK for the R word and recording his attacks. And it's rare in the UK to get such a sentence. So my opinion, this kind of crime is being taken more seriously. The bigger issue, or the bigger point I think to make here, is that this is obviously not relegated to the United States. This is going on all over the world. A lot of great people out there and a lot of sick people as well. So you got to be careful, especially as a parent. But back to I'm going to kind of jump back and forth between the legal side of this and the DV grooming side of it. But And to you, from the prosecutorial side of things, what are they doing, do you think, from sort of an investigative standpoint? One of the big questions is, did the mother have something to do with this? Kind of the collective conscious is saying in some form, but people don't know how. So I'm just curious, what do you think is going on behind the scenes in the state attorney's office?
Well, one of the things we really try to emphasize in child cases, but also in adult cases and also in domestic violence cases that don't involve sexual abuse, is that these are not incident-based crimes. These are context-based crimes. And so one of the first things, and to understand them and to be successful at bringing forth the truth around really what's been going on in cases like this, it requires going back and really understanding the context of how this happened. So to Anna's point, grooming is, we have sex offenders groom, period. That's what they do. And that's true whether they're children or whether they're adults. And so if we can get back to the beginning origins of kind of how that started and what that looked like, and start a timeline, really, and then begin from there to gain an understanding of, okay, where might the evidence be in this case? Because people are so used to DNA evidence or whatever. They watch a lot of TV. The truth is that these cases are corroborated often by, well, the ones I prosecuted, the things that stand out in my mind were a child talks to her best friend, or maybe makes outcry, to someone that lives down the street that they trust, or maybe even a teacher. They might make a journal entry, their behavior changes. They gain 50 pounds, they lose 50 pounds, like things begin to change. This crime changes people. Who they were before is no longer who they are now. And I don't mean that as a judgment. I mean that this is a crime as much against the psyche as it is against the body. So it's really about understanding the context of all of this and learning how to investigate a case thoroughly with an understanding of trauma in mind, and talk to everyone, right? Really look and see, did people know this was going on and maybe just not say something about it? Because that's also very, very typical. In terms of the mom, and this is not by way of excuse, believe me, this is by way of explanation or understanding that I had to have learned kind of working these issues and doing these cases for so long. I don't know if the defendant was also abusive with her. I have no idea what was going on in that relationship. What I can say is that sometimes there are very real threats to what we call quote unquote non-offending parent. And I say that loosely, right? I just say that so we're talking about not the person who had hands-on crime, the other one. They are also impacted. Sometimes by pretty difficult. Sorry. Yeah. So it's hard to say.
Go ahead.
Cut out.
You froze up. You froze up for a sec. Go ahead, Ann. I'm sorry.
Okay. It's very hard to say. What they will do, they will hope to do anyway, is talk with her in a way that she can hopefully offer the truth about whatever it is that she does understand. Because if this sexual abuse was happening, perhaps starting at age 8, I know any parent in the world thinks there's no way that could happen without my knowing it. That's not necessarily true, but between 8 and 13 is a pretty long time. I mean, I had one case where the offender was offending against the mother's child. So he was also the boyfriend of the mother in the same bed where the mother slept while he was sexually offending against a child in that same bed. And so it could be anything. I don't know, but their investigation might put some pressure on her or some pressure on him, possibly if they're probably not talking with him anymore. He has an attorney, but they will very much try to really leverage the truth and maybe use that in the way that will serve justice the best.
And there are reports out there that the mom opened up the bed for her boyfriend to sleep alongside Maddie. So those are just reports in the media. Belkey's, it's been coming up in the chat. It's not this comment, but since this law was just passed in Florida last year, some people say that law, he is not eligible for the death penalty. I don't know. I don't want to put you on the spot because this is fairly detailed legal stuff. But do you happen to know if that's a case where he cannot be charged or he cannot face the death penalty for this capital SA charge that he's been slapped with?
Yeah, he most certainly can. So the law changed in two ways. One is that now he qualifies for the death penalty, and also that it no longer has to be a unanimous verdict. So the state only has to convince 8 of the 12 jurors. So if there are 8 yeses, that's enough to send him to death row.
Wow. When did the jury number, did that change the same time as the law?
No, so Governor DeSantis signed in the law for the death penalty. The other issue has been argued with our Florida Supreme Court. Previously, it wasn't unanimous, and then they switched it to unanimous, and now it's back to not unanimous.
Wow. Yeah. Don't mess with Texas and don't mess with Florida, because it's not a good place to commit a crime. But that's the message I think Ron DeSantis is trying to send without getting political in any which way. But Belkey's, I left politics. I used to cover politics for Fox News. The last thing I want to do is talk about politics. Trust me. But Belkey's, what's your take on the mom from sort of a legal point of view? So she has lawyered up too, from what we understand. It's been eerily quiet. Let's put it that way. Nothing's been said about her one way or the other. But I asked Ann about the, state attorney's office. They've got to be looking at her really closely now, right? I mean, what sorts of things are they considering or investigating?
Sure. So, I mean, I imagine they've pulled cell phones and dumped, cell phone information to go through with a fine-tooth comb, text messages, any communications between her and her boyfriend. They're probably interviewing everyone who's come across the family. It's my understanding they lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. She worked nights, and so the little girl was left, to be available to him. In my experience, I would say 9 out of 10 mothers of children who are SA have been victims themselves. And we see that they get into relationships with men seeking validation or whatever for their own being, and really just go along with what's happening. Not that it's happening in their face, not that they're approving it, but not that they're doing anything I think that a regular mom would be doing to ensure that this type of behavior is not able to happen. So I imagine she's being investigated. It was a different turn of events for Stephan, just because this cell phone dump produced all of this information that is black and white as to what was happening. I think with the mom, it's going to take more time to do a thorough investigation and see. They don't want to pull the trigger too quickly. I'm sure they want to make sure that they have what they need before they move forward. And at the minimum, I'd imagine, if nothing else, they'll probably charge her with child neglect. But if they can figure out anything more, if she knew what was happening, if she somehow participated in ultimately what led to her daughter's passing, I'm sure that there will be charges forthcoming. But I think they don't have enough just yet, and they want to make sure that they do it right, because they're only really going to get one chance to do it.
And there you hear from Belkey's, at the very least, it'll probably be neglect. Who knew? It's tough to say what the real story is with the mom and that whole relationship. And there has not been as much as you might expect in the media. From Jenny Price, this is to Anna. Why would a mom lie to police and protect someone who possibly basically off their daughter? Who would Maddie have confided in? Your response to this, Anna?
I think there's more to learn about the mom, which will come out as we get more discovery. I would hate to hypothesize about what her psychological, her biopsychosocial portfolio would look like. When it comes to that second part of the question, schools are doing a much better job now of having social emotional learning training programs where they're required by law to address child sexual abuse. So what we also know from research is that the majority of kids who do tell a friend. So that's why we all need to be aware of this subject, because it may not be our kid who's being abused, but maybe our kid goes to a birthday party or a sleepover with somebody, or is out on the playground and somebody says, this is happening at home and I just wanted to tell you, don't tell anybody. And we need to be prepared as parents to have those conversations with our kids so that they know how to handle that. That's very important.
And Anne, I'd love you to weigh in on this. This is a big question that we get frequently on this case, sadly. Do you think that she was tired of it, meaning Maddie, and told him, Stephan Sterns, she's going to tell, or do you think he just got tired because she was aging, so to speak? And then Jenny Price is back with what is the possible trigger that caused this step monster to go from SA to murder? A lot of people point to this 13th birthday as a potential trigger. But your thinking when it comes to this, I've spoken to investigators who say that they think he probably snapped kind of in the quote unquote heat of the moment, but curious what you think.
Well,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. We'll go to Anna and then Anne.
I would just say this guy was a predator. So to think that he was not a monster before he killed her and now he is a monster, the label of predator runs the whole way. I have heard some hypotheses about maybe her dying as a result of actions that he was taking that might not have been an intentional form of him killing her, but it was accidental, maybe something that happened in the course of the sexual abuse, which I don't think is unlikely. I'm flabbergasted that this little girl had to endure for as long as she did. But when we invite predators into our homes, they have unlimited access and space with vulnerable children. And there is no way that Maddie could have gotten herself out of that situation. So it's possible that she said, hey, I'm getting tired of this. But if we look at the grooming process, it starts out really sweet, but boy, does it sour. By the time you're at that fourth stage of grooming, we're into, don't you tell anybody, I'm going to kill you if you tell somebody, your mom's going to lose her job. I'm babysitting for you so that your mom can work. Where do you think you're going to live if I'm not here? You really want to mess that up? What option does Maddie have? Here she is, a little girl who thinks, well, he's right. He's got all the agency. Children lack that agency. So we have to keep that in mind when we think, oh, well, she had no power and no resources at her disposal in that way, which is quite sad.
And to you, what do you think could have been the trigger here?
Again, just to reiterate a little bit of what Anna said, she very likely didn't fall in love with a monster. She fell in love with the facade of a person who presented himself as somebody that was safe to be around and that her child was safe to be around. That's how they get in, right? And then things really change. And then when you go to the end of the timeline that Anna also just referred to, what we know from at least adult domestic violence cases is that often when a victim talks about leaving or threatens to leave or does leave, the risk of lethality to that victim increases by 75%. Because really what it is, and so whether we're talking about a similar situation or a domestic violence situation, a person who sexually abuses, physically abuses another human being, that's about control. That is about, I'm in charge and you are not. It's a power differential completely. One person has the power, the other person doesn't. And when if that person begins to take actions or make statements about possibly taking that power back and leaving or running away or telling or showing the video to the police, Could that be a trigger? And of course, this is 100% speculation, right? I'm just talking hypothetically. Absolutely. That could be a trigger to a person that cannot in their mind afford to give up the control or be found out.
From Daisy here, this is to Belkey's. There's been some speculation out there because no homicide charges have been brought. But the question is, could Maddie have taken her own life in despair? And that's why he's not been charged with her murder. He then hid her body, knowing an autopsy would show evidence of the SA. Is this a possibility, Belkey's, or very unlikely? Because there's also eyewitnesses who saw him driving with what would have had to have been the body in the car. But, people don't understand, hey, why have there not been homicide charges yet? So is this plausible?
I mean, anything is possible. Anything could have happened that evening or that early morning. A lot of things are possible. I think when it comes to a homicide charge, the reason that hasn't happened is because they have all of these other charges. So they have enough to hold him. He's not going anywhere. He's going to remain in custody. And now they have all of the time they need to put everything together. The state is not in the arena to just jump on something and charge it, because the speedy trial rules do exist. And if someone knows, if a defense attorney knows you've charged my client with something and you can't prove it, I'm going to hold you to that. And we're going to move forward. And when you can't prove it, then that's the end of that. And so now they can do what they need to do. They can take their time, do the autopsy, do whatever investigation they need before they actually bring forward charges, because that's not really going to change what's happening with these other charges. The case that he has seems like a slam dunk. And so I think that allows them to work more patiently. There's no rush. They want to do it right.
And to you, the ME report, as far as we know, hasn't been released. There are really strict rules in Florida with the age of, making it publicly available. And she's obviously in the category where it's not supposed to be released, but the media usually does a pretty good job of letting that out. Why do you think we haven't really heard, manner, cause of death, any of these things yet?
That's a great question. My guess is it has to do with testing results, examinations, perhaps consultation with other experts. And I could be wrong about this, but I think she was not found for about 4 days. And in that 4-day period of time, things things can happen, right? Things can happen in a 4-day period of time with a person that is deceased that can be a little bit of a challenge. And so my guess, honestly, and it really doesn't seem that terribly long to me. I also, because she's a child, it very well may be that they know what the medical examiner has concluded and are considering that without so far the public having received any information or the media about that.
Michelle clarifying that she turned 13 on February 22nd, not January 22nd, but that could have certainly been a trigger, was that age. From Danielle Malley to Anna, how common is that boyfriends, stepdads abuse their partner's children? It makes me anxious when I see women introduce their children to every guy they date. What about that, Anna? How discreet does a mother have to be if she is a single mom introducing her to different potential men in her life?
Well, let's start with a statistic that a lot of people don't realize. Children who are in foster care are 10 times more likely to be sexually abused than children who live at home with 2 biological parents. Children who live at home with a dating single parent are 20 times more likely to be sexually abused. So it is an enormous, enormous threat. It's unpopular to discuss because, a lot of women do want and rightfully seek out relationships. However, there is an enormous, enormous risk when bringing boyfriends and romantic partners into the home. Because again, if we go back to that idea that the home is the most high-risk environment, sure, can you date? Absolutely. Would it be ideal to date away from your child? Yes. Would it be ideal to wait until you have no minor kids at home? Yes. Would it be ideal to only have romantic partners over when no substances are being used? Most of the time, home is where we're opening a bottle of wine or maybe partaking in drug use or other substances, which again decreases our vigilance on safety. The home is also where bathrooms and bedrooms are. And most of the patients that I worked with would use times such as nighttime, bedtime routines, showering routines in order to gain intimate access. And these are considerations that every single woman really needs to take in earnest. We really need to have that conversation, especially as more children are born in this country to unwed mothers than at any other time in our history. And that's not a judgment, that's just statistics. So we have some vulnerable children who need this information and who need parents and teachers and adults in the community to have this awareness and this knowledge so that we can all be part of that protective environment around a child. It's not just solely the responsibility of the parent, but boy, it really helps if your home life is safe.
And Truth Seeker Human says, and these stats from Anna may be even be low because many SA victims do not tell until adulthood. Thanks to Anna for being knowledgeable. Davy Jones brings up an interesting point here to Belkey's, the attorney. They're building a RICO case, which is racketeering. But I guess the bigger question here is, and we can get Ann to weigh in too, but Belkey's, is it possible that this person was dealing in a larger conspiracy, possibly selling videos, doing this to other kids, and that there's a larger conspiracy here?
Could that be? Sure, that could be. I don't know that we have anything that would say that that's the case. From all of the charges that I've seen thus far, they're specifically about Maddie. The information, the videos, the photographs on his phone were all related to her. So while it's possible that there were other victims or that he's involved in something else, sure. But I don't think there's anything that would substantiate that at this point.
By the way, everyone is making fun of me in the chat for walking the COE's dog before we were married. She came into the newsroom. I was introduced to her. I was a very nice gentleman. I offered to walk her dog. The dog, may she rest in peace, Zilla, Zillah. I quickly named her Killa, and eventually I became her stepdad. And let's put it this way. Killa would not even acknowledge the COE's presence in her room, not even acknowledge it. She would only come over to me, and I was with her from that moment on until her last moment, which was in Los Angeles. And I'm not even sure the COE knows that Killa's no longer with us. Do you, COE? No, COE was good to her, but I was a little bit better and took her under my wing. Do you think that the predator will throw the mother under the bus, saying that she knew about everything? And I'm curious about the prior question, which is, could there be something much bigger going on here? But also this, in your experience, do you see, I always ask you two questions at once, but do you see an issue here where he does flip on her, to use the legal jargon?
Well, to answer your first question, I'll do my best to remember the second one as well. But to answer your first question, just what we know about sex offenders and how many victims they acquire in a short period of time, sometimes depending on the study, but in their lifetimes, it is staggering. All right. So when we think about, could it be bigger than one victim, for example, most offenders offend against multiple victims, some of them child, some of them adult. They also often commit domestic violence. They're like one-person crime waves. Okay, these are people who see interpersonal violence as normal. and the power over model to them is life, right? So even if we don't know all of the facts, what we do know from longitudinal studies over decades is that there's crossover offending and that offenders rack up more victims than we ever care to even think about. It's also the most underreported crime in our country, sexual abuse. And so it is kind of, we've created a petri dish in some ways for perpetrators to operate. So what I would say to your listener is that investigation that I guess Kissimmee County now maybe is doing, or the police department there, should also not just focus on Maddie. This should focus on other children in the neighborhood. It should focus on his social circles. It should focus on his previous girlfriends. This should be a comprehensive investigation just to get where the tip of the iceberg is from evidence that's possible. When you're talking about filming children performing sexual acts, which is hard for any of us to even think about, right? I mean, this is the investigators that have to do that work are among the toughest and I think most willing people that I know. It's the hardest work I think that there could be. And so because of the extreme thirst on the part of predators like this, on the part of pedophiles, on the part of, sex offenders that see this as normal, if you could even imagine that in a world, it would not at all surprise me that either consuming from another source or perhaps sharing this particular source is something they'll uncover. Yeah.
Just by the way, I'm thinking about this. A very quick note. I'll get to Anna in just 1 second. But Carm, your friend Carm, my mother, the co-host of this great show, was supposed to be on tomorrow, and we were going to cover this investigative reporter out of Las Vegas who was assassinated by an elected official. His trial was supposed to start. A guy named Robert Tellis is the suspect in custody. Jeff Herman, spelled like German, is the victim in that case. But we are going to push that story back. But the reason I bring it up is Court TV called, and they want Carm on tomorrow night on this story on Maddie Soto with Vinnie Politan. So tomorrow night, 8:00, set your DVRs or whatever you do these days. Carm is coming back. She's panicked because she only has 24 hours to prepare, and she's watching this right now. So she learns the ins and outs of the Maddie Soto case. But we'll both be on with Vinny unless there's some kind of breaking news tomorrow night at 8:00. Anna, I know you wanted to jump in, so hop right in.
I was just going to say, on Stephan's Facebook page, it lists one of his employers as Disney World.
Yeah.
And I know that hasn't really been brought up in as much of the media as I would have suspected. But predators are intentional about the environments they seek out. So it would not be a huge shock to think that he put himself in environments where he had access to multiple children. And to back up Anne's point, 70% of child sexual abusers have 1 to 9 victims, and 20% have 10 to 40. We really have an issue when it comes to people relying on a registry when the sex offender registry is not what I'm worried about. Everyone always asks me that question. Do you look at the sex offender registry? And I say, most of the predators aren't on a registry. So that's not a problem. I have to behave a certain way at all times, not because somebody's on a list or not on a list. And if we could just sort of turn the tide a little bit to not having the expectation that all the predators are actually caught or are going to be caught, because that's a false sense of security.
What I'm about to say is going to be highly controversial. I will get hate mail, but 2 rodents I dislike, Mickey Mouse and Chuck E. Cheese, but my kids love both of them. And every time I go into either of those places, Chuck E. Cheese or Disney World, I always feel like there's Stephan Sterns types around. So you got to be careful. That has not been confirmed, by the way. These three women are looking at me like I'm crazy. My son's favorite place is Chuck E. Cheese. I was just with him there a couple of weeks ago, but man, a lot of noise in that place. But it is true that these people who groom young children, Anna, right? They're going to find places like this to call home, to be employed at. Be Real has a comment here. According to his childhood friend, Stephan was interested in girls age 7 when he was 16. Now we have to take this with a grain of salt, but these are his close friends who were interviewed on local television. Does that surprise you if that is the case? Anna or Ann? Anna?
No,
Anna?
I'm not surprised to see distorted sexual arousal dating back through adolescence. That doesn't surprise me. But what we need to drill down on is that it doesn't really matter if he is aroused by 7-year-old children. We need to protect all children from people with that affinity for kids.
Anne, to you, same thing. Does that surprise you? And there's a question here. Can these people ever change, these predators? Is there any hope for them?
First of all, no, it doesn't surprise me at all. And I know that a lot, I cannot remember the number, but a large number of adult sex offenders start in adolescence. That's when they start offending. And so, no, it's not a surprise to me. You know, I will say, and I have been friends over the years with some of the people that I think are the very best in treatment of sex offenders, or, the attempt of treatment of sex offenders, and have helped design programs at, our state penitentiary system and that kind of thing for offenders. Colorado really in the past has tried to do a lot around the rehabilitation of sex offenders. I have also had the experience of prosecuting a man more than once just in my 7 years at the Denver District Attorney's Office, because the judge over my objections put him on probation after he was convicted of offending against his granddaughter. And then he is sex offended against another one of his grandchildren, and we prosecuted him for that. So me and the work that I do, and I get that this is the way that I see the world, but I believe I've just not seen this change. When you look at the statistics and the number of offenses that they rack up, and you look at the one study that I'm thinking of was while on probation, after a full set of treatment, while checking in with probation officers and under a plethysmograph, right, which is a tool that measures sexual arousal, and under lie detectors, the dishonesty was just stunning. And I'm sorry that I didn't dig that up. I probably should have, but there's a study that really shows the continued offending even after treatment, and it's just too discouraging. And so to me, the game is about accountability and our doing our job to hold offenders accountable. We don't in this country very well at all. And so I think we all need to do more to admit the truth about what happens to both children and adults, both boys and girls and men and women, by sex offenders, and do the hard work of really keeping our communities safe.
Very well said. Carm letting us all know she is watching. She's there. Tarn is definitely not American, because she just asked, we've got a global audience, what is Chuck E. Cheese? And thankfully for STS, Darla the Destroyer has the answer. Chuck E. Cheese is the rodent, the place where kids can go crazy and they drive their parents crazy. It is very loud in there, and I've got to run around. And my boy is in a car driving stage. I have to play all like the car driving games, and you can't even steer on those things. So it's just total insanity. Now, Belkis, back to you on this. This obviously is a week or so old, but 60 new charges levied against Stephan Sterns, 8 counts of, you can read it here, 5 counts of sexual battery, 7 counts of lewd and lascivious. It goes on and on and on. What is sort of the legal thinking in adding all of these charges, 60 new charges on top of what he was already facing?
So I think, the state is probably going to add everything that they think they can prove beyond into the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. And so from my understanding of what's on the videos, it seems as though they have physical evidence, videos, photographs, what have you, to be able to prove these charges. And as they continue their investigation, I imagine that they will add more charges. That doesn't mean that he will go to trial on all of those charges, that if they negotiate some type of plea, he'll plead to all of those charges. But I think the state is, doing their due diligence, and they're going to file everything that they think they can convict him of.
Why the screen is staying black, I will never know, but I can't argue with that. I think we have a piece of video, so now is a perfect time to play it. The COE put this together. Here we go.
Here and there, people say they see this or that. None of it. Conflicting reports.
By the way, it goes without saying, this is a WFTV exclusive. This is Stephan Sterns before he was obviously arrested. This is a new piece of sound that I think the COE pulled.
Here and there, people say they see this or that. None of it's conclusive and none of it's helpful. We just wanted a baby girl back.
Tom, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Thank you.
This is obviously, and there you see, this is why the COE picked this. You see her here really consoling him. Anna, if she did know, this is incredibly disturbing. I mean, hindsight is 2020, so we don't know yet. But if she did know what was going on, what do you make of this?
Joel, I think your listeners might be quite shocked at how many romantic interests stay together even after allegations of child sexual abuse. I'm sure if we were to poll maybe some of your audience or a random group of adult survivors, we would hear more often than not that romantic connections between the adult caregiver and the predator remained intact. It takes a tremendous amount of courage on the part of the parent to follow up, to report, to go through the legal system. We all know how arduous the legal system can be, and sometimes it doesn't lead to a sense of satisfaction or justice. I have no idea what her motivation is to stay in her relationship with him, but there were multiple factors that probably led her decision to stay with him and to be consoling him in that moment.
It's hard to wrap your head around, and especially when you talk about people staying together, there's this odd comfort zone that people get in. Sometimes it goes deeper than that. We have Collier Landry on the show a lot, and his father murdered his own mother. And, he still has this deep love for his father, even though he's a convicted killer of his own mom. So human beings definitely react in bizarre ways that are, that are not easily predictable. And I'm just curious, obviously I just took the video down, but what went through your head when you just saw that?
I'm not surprised either. I've seen parents, usually it is the mother, choose the relationship over the child many, many times. And I don't claim to understand that. I also, in some training I used to do, we used to play a clip called, loosely, it's called Texas Justice. And it's the story of a young girl that was raised in Texas, was being sexually abused and sexually assaulted by a teacher there. And she was younger than Maddie, maybe up to about Maddie's age. by the time she made outcry and she finally got an investigator to really listen to her and, back her story up, do an investigation. Part of this documentary, if you will, shows they get all of this man's co-teachers together. And each one of them says, I think he's a great teacher. I don't believe he did anything wrong, and I'd let my kids be alone with him, one after the next after the next. And what you hear from the mother is victim blaming, right? To this adolescent girl who was probably preteen when this started, that she might have done something to ask for this. So it's hard to even imagine what goes through people's heads. But when it comes to actually admitting to themselves that they live with and have been sleeping with a sex offender, sometimes they cannot do that. And to the extent that they have to basically sacrifice the other things in their lives, I've seen it happen. It's horrifying, but it's just a measure of both the denial and how quick we are to, I'll just say it, to sacrifice, the younger children. And we certainly do this with adult victims too.
Horrific. Since Carm's in the chat, I'll let you know that she will sign a custom inscription on the book at signedsurvivorbook.com. It is available for pre-orders on Amazon right now. It's a running joke, everyone, that I said, hey, do you know I've written a book? But I have written a book and it's coming out, and Carm is signing them. And there are custom inscriptions. Again, signedsurvivorbook.com. Right now she's going, oh, I can't believe he's saying this. He's so annoying, but gotta sell the book, Carm. I want to get back to Belkey's in a minute, but this is such a blunt, great question from Danielle to Anna. What makes these people like this? Is there research? Do we know? Are they born this way? Are they formed? And I'm talking about the predators now. How does one wind up like this?
It's a really interesting question that has a lot of research around it, but nobody's able to pinpoint one specific thing. Many of these individuals grow up in homes with domestic violence, possibly abusive situations, a lack of stability, a lack of security, a lack of connection, possibly with caregivers or guardians. The trouble is, even if we did have a magic bullet of what caused it, we can't go into everybody's household and fix it. The one thing we can do is protect our kids and protect kids that we work around or volunteer around or are in our religious communities and our sporting and activity communities. It's an enormous enigma, if you will, but certainly instability. I know we hear a myth, obviously, all the time about, well, people who were victimized become perpetrators and become predators. But if you look at that, who are the majority of the victims of child sexual abuse? Women, not men. And yet, when we look at the incarceration rates for sex offenders, 95% of the time, they're men. What were their distorted relationships around sex and intimacy in their homes? Yes. But we cannot say conclusively that one childhood event creates or causes predators. And what we're noticing in the trend now is that 40% of all reported child sexual abuse cases are coming from peers. So we have a growing issue. Some have articulated that maybe it's because of the rampant porn and all the violent sexual images that children have exposure to through devices and other means. But we really have a conundrum on our hands, and it takes all the individuals here as well as your audience to be chief prevention officers, if you will, and be intentional.
Anna has all the knowledge on this, obviously, as does Ann Munch. Amazing what we are learning tonight. And I still want to get Anna to you about what I have to tell my kid directly. We'll get back to that. But Belkey's, there's some bad facts in this case, as they say in the legal world. And that is that Stephan Sterns claimed to have dropped off Maddie at school that morning, that fateful day. She never arrived at school. The mother also in an interview said that at one point she uses the term we and then says he dropped her off. But the fact that her backpack and school laptop are found in the same dumpster, and then that there's some eyewitnesses saying that they see Stephan Sterns with who appears to be Maddie. These are really problematic, bad facts for whoever the public defender is, aren't they?
Absolutely. And some of that is documented on video. So eyewitness testimony isn't always the best or the most reliable, but here we have actual video surveillance of him driving and what appears to be Maddie in the car. The fact that he threw her items into the dumpster before that, is also problematic. Those are more charges that could be forthcoming: tampering with evidence, trying to destroy things so that the police cannot find them. So yeah, those are very bad facts. I think most of the information that we have is pretty concrete evidence. And so in many cases like this, it's hard. It's sometimes hard for the prosecution to prove their cases when they have the word of a victim child and don't have any other actual physical evidence. And so I know for defense attorneys, sometimes that is, it's easier for them to defend a case, to put up a fight when all we have is the word of a child victim. And the mother may be the one, defending the predator, saying there's no way, this not possible. I was always with them. He didn't act different with the child. But this case definitely is a different type of case where the evidence that is mounting is really big.
Anna, by the way, green-eyed PI with the super question here. Mom issues, question mark. I'm sure there are motherly issues. I just read a comment in the chat that said that she, the mother, would blame everything on him once being hit by a car in a parking lot as a young child. That would be her excuse for all the behavior. But Anna, I was going to ask you, if Maddie survived this and grew up to be a young woman and then a middle-aged woman, how badly would her life have been affected? And the bigger question is, can you come out the other side of this like a whole person again? Anne said it's a crime of the psyche, but can you recover? Is it possible?
That's a wonderful, wonderful question. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention just came out with research in the last few years about something called ACEs, which are adverse childhood events. So for your listeners, everyone needs to be familiar with this concept. So what the CDC has discovered is that the higher your ACE score, ACE, the more likely you are to have chronic physical ailments, the more likely you are to have potential mental health issues, possibly increased risk for substance dependence issues. We need to be highly aware of risk factors that may exist in our own communities and families. Some examples of ACEs are filing for bankruptcy, divorce or separation of a parent, incarceration of a parent or caregiver, childhood sexual abuse, domestic violence. So in our own world, yes, we cannot go into other people's homes, but we have within our control, maybe in a small way, the ability to improve the lives of our children's outcomes when they're adults by preventing these experiences within their own childhoods.
Well put. I'm not T-Pain. We'll throw this one to Anne Munch. During interviews, when her mother recounts the story of when she went missing, she says we multiple times and included herself in dropping Maddie off. Do you think, Anne, that this indicates she knew, or at the very least was trying to cover up for the boyfriend?
Well, clearly that is a question that if police have an opportunity to interview her, they would ask very directly. Of course, that is a possibility that the we is in the literal sense of what was happening literally at the time. It also could be that we is the parental unit. You do this today, I do this tomorrow. We get her to school, kind of thing. I have. It's hard to say, but it's interesting to look at the languaging that people use when they're asked about these kinds of things. And my guess is that will be, well, if they have an opportunity to speak with her, or if any kinds of charges are forthcoming, that would be something that they would hone in on for sure. And the other thing I just want to say real quickly, because it's so clear, this audience is amazing, obviously. A lot of people with a lot of knowledge and perhaps experience, personal experience with what we're talking about. And this is really tough stuff. And I will just put a vote in to tell you that, to me, survivors of childhood sexual abuse or adult sexual abuse, whether male or female, are the most courageous people that I know, and have they just have more chutzpah, if you will, in learning how to move forward with that reality that they never asked for, and have my deepest respect. And I just want to say that, because this is it's hard to talk about. Even just talking about it is difficult, and I can't imagine. I'm a pretty lucky person. Grew up in a really safe and loving home, and I have deep empathy for people that did not.
Very, very well said. I echo that. Could not have said it better. And it is a very hard thing to talk about, but you heard it there. If you need to, you play it back. Ann just said it. She has the utmost respect for all these survivors. I'm not T-Pain, one of our great mods. Survivors are the best people, in my opinion. That's probably why I love STS so much. Well said here by Grant Lloyd. Thank you, Ann. So, and Rick, who says, Ann, you are amazing. So there you go. There's one final piece of video. I'm not even sure what this is, but I'm just going to play it. The COE put it in, and I blame her if it's something that I shouldn't be playing. Here we go. This is a TikTok, obviously, from the birthday party. This is her, and she's smiling there. It's a sad video now, obviously, and there she's posing, and in a typical Florida backyard there, where you can get eaten by an alligator. Beautiful looking house, beautiful looking neighborhood, as she's celebrating her 13th birthday. Man, that is tough to look at, considering what we know now. I want to thank our amazing guests. I did not forget about my question to Anna, but first to Belkis Plata. She's a champion of human and civil rights. She practices law in Jacksonville, from the Bronx, just like my father. So I've got a soft spot in my heart for her. Belkis, what's next in these in the legal proceedings here? Again, you said there's no way this is going to trial in May. So what should we expect?
I can expect more information is going to be coming out. The defense is going to be getting a lot of discovery. I can only imagine the amount of paperwork that was done in this case. I imagine there will be other agencies that become involved. So when we defend cases like this, because we have child pornography, because there are images of this child, normally federal agencies get involved. We are not allowed to possess this information. Obviously, our clients are not allowed to possess it, but we do have to review it before we go to trial. And so there's going to be a lot of things that have to happen before the defense can get ready. But I imagine as we move along this process, there will continue to be more discovery and more things that have to be done. There are dozens of police officers that are going to have to be deposed. There's so much work to be done. And I don't imagine any of that work has started yet, because the defense is probably just getting their hands on a lot of the discovery. I wanted to say one other thing that I don't know if people know about this, but Ann was talking about her experience with a predator, being released and then reoffending, which is something that we see all of the time. And in Florida, we have something called the Jimmy Rice Act. And Jimmy Rice was a little boy who lost his life after he was abducted, sexually assaulted, and murdered by a sex offender. And because of that, when a person who has previously been convicted of a sexually motivated or violent offense, before they get released back, they can be held in civil commitment, where they are sent to a hospital where they try to fix these people, and they can be held indefinitely for the rest of their lives. So no matter the fact that their criminal case has been resolved, even if you were arrested for a new crime, a different crime, maybe you were arrested in the 80s for something, and now you're back for stealing a bag of Skittles from Walgreens. When your sentence is complete on that case, you could be civilly committed, because the state of Florida understands the severity of what can happen, when a child's been victimized, and they can keep them indefinitely to prevent them from being able to recommit another offense.
Joe Marr was just saying amazing knowledge with this panel. And there you go. We're not best guests in true crime. It's not just a tagline, as I say, it is our reality. And you're seeing why tonight. This is a powerful group of women. Anna Soto is a licensed clinical social worker, just like Carm is a licensed clinical social worker. In 2020, she set out to re-educate adults about child SA by concentrating on grooming, which she says is the precursor to SA. She has written a book. Check it out. Duck, Duck, Groom. Duck, Duck, Groom, Understanding How a Child Becomes a Target. The book again, Duck, Duck, Groom. Quick reminder, though, before I go to my last set of questions here. Tomorrow, this is unbelievable. We've been covering the Corey Richins case out of Salt Lake City. She's accused of murdering her husband with 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl. And guess what? Now her mother is being investigated for a suspicious death of her former husband, who they think may have died by poisoning. So I've got some amazing guests coming up on that one tomorrow. And believe it or not, considering what we have been covering, that is almost lighter than what we've been covering. So gets us off the topic of young children, at least, which I need a break from. So Anna, with all that said, what do I say to my children to prevent any of this? It's one of my biggest fears. They go to after school programs. They do all sorts of things. Someone said to me, you tell them there's no such thing as a secret between any adult and them other than me. But is there something I can add to that?
So I would begin by saying the best protective measure is the relationship that you are building with your kids. So being an available ear, being an available opinion, so that you can toss, sort of mock situations around, like, hey, when you go to after school care, what would you do if this happened? What would you do if, when you went to the toilet, your after school counselor walked in behind you? How would you handle that situation? So that you're empowering the kids to be thinking in terms of personal safety. But that cornerstone really is the relationship that they have with their caregivers. In regards to secrets, I like to explain the difference between secrecy, privacy, and surprise. Surprises are always positive. It's always about limiting information for a short period of time before experiencing joy or celebration. Privacy is about withholding information due to financial or medical reasons with a small group of people. Like, we don't post the location of the outside key to the house on a billboard for safety reasons. That's privacy. And then secrets are always about harming somebody. Secrets always are either about hurting somebody or putting somebody in a position to be harmed. So even my 4-year-old knows we don't keep secrets. Sonotas don't keep secrets. So that might be that you have a conversation that says, if anybody says, let's keep this between us, don't tell anybody, this is our little secret, that you have that conversation with your kids out loud to understand the difference and maybe play around again with those mock situations. Hey, like what you get on a report card, would you consider that secret, or would you consider that private, or would you consider that a surprise? So that you're engaging in conversations with your kids. Children are so intelligent, and they have so much that they're seeking from us. And we sometimes miss out on the opportunity to inform their thinking process. So if we just engage them in the conversation in a really intentional manner, we can help protect them and build a family protocol of safety and well-being. If you don't already, there are systems in place for things when your children are older, like a secret tagline, like I left my gym bag in the car that says, I really want to get out of here, Mom, but I don't want to have to say it in front of my friends, or I don't want to have to write it in a text, that you know and your spouse knows, okay, well, he said he left his bag in the car, so we're going to go pick him up because he doesn't actually want to be there. So that's the sort of thing we're talking about. The most intimate relationship should be between you and your child.
Really well put, and that's why we all need to read Duck, Duck, Groom, Anna Sonota's book, Understanding How a Child Becomes a Target COE. You better order that off the Amazon. By the way, people who watch the show regularly know that I listen to old episodes of radio, which I know is really weird, but I was listening to Coast AM, Art Bell from 1999, and he said, there's this new thing called Amazon.com, and they're selling books. And he's like, I have no idea how this is going to succeed. Who would ever buy a book from a place online? He said. Anyway, that was 1999. Today it's 2024. And Art Bell, obviously, that's why he was a radio guy and not a tech guy. But final guest, Ann Munch. She's an attorney with more than 30 years of experience as a career prosecutor and advocate for victims of DV, SA, and stalking. She's worked alongside the U.S. military to help develop their SA prevention and response programs. She's really turned this into kind of a labor of love in her life, helping victims of this. And Ann, what you said earlier, I don't think can be topped, but your final thoughts on this heavy subject today.
I think my final thoughts would be, and I'm sure that the other guests or the other experts who are here tonight understand that it's really important to take care of yourselves and to make sure that you have good and healthy outlets, including you, Joel, who has to, engage in the kind of crime and telling of stories and these really hard realities. It's not easy. And when we are exposed to this kind of thing, we are impacted. And so I just want to tell the folks that heard and are just following this, because it's just so devastating, to make sure to take breaks from it, to get outside, to do healthy things, to walk around the block, to love your kids and to pet your animals, and make sure that, you attend to yourself, because this is very real. And doing more than just dabbling in it takes a big toll. So hopefully the good news is most of the people in the world are really, really good people. It is a small percentage of people that sex offend or are domestic violence offenders. And we just need to continue to love the good in people and hope for justice for this young girl.
Anne is what you call a bad, and it last word rhymes with sass. She's a bad sass, and I love it. I would have liked to have seen her operating as a prosecutor in the courtroom. Her and Belkis would have gone head to head. It would have been I don't know what. It would have been some sort of combustible experience. But loved having this panel of women on. Look at this, Jomar. Ann, wow, you're such a warrior for so many. By the way, Carmen COE, did you hear her say that Joel needs a break every once in a while and needs an outlet? That means I need to be left alone with no kids, no Chuck E. Cheese, no Disney World, which is in driving distance, but we'll take care of that. Anyway, loved having this panel. We'll have them back on. Love you, America. Love you, the Bronx. Love you, Jacksonville. Love you, Colorado. And love you, Atlanta, Georgia. We'll see you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern time. As we discussed, by the way, I didn't know Corey Richan's significant other was a woman till the chat just told me that, but makes it even more intriguing. We will cover that story tomorrow. And don't miss Carm on Core TV with Vinny, 8 p.m. tomorrow. Panel, stick around 1 second.